Hey everyone, today we're going to be going over one of my favorite concepts to teach at the middle school level, and honestly one of what I feel like is one of the most important concepts to teach at the K-12 level, and that is the idea behind constructive criticism. Both how to give effective constructive criticism to like projects that a peer might be working on, but also how to listen to constructive criticism, listen to constructive criticism, hear it without feeling insulted or hurt, especially if it's just really great constructive criticism, and how to improve products that you're working on, and also how to apply that constructive criticism to create the best possible project that you can. So I think before getting started, the first thing I think that I always start with my students is that the real important word in constructive criticism is the word constructive. Because if you look at the word constructive, right, the word construct is in there, which essentially means to build. And so what I remind my students is that with constructive criticism, the idea is that you are building someone up with every single piece of advice that you are giving. And I think another very important part of constructive criticism is that the person that you're working with has to agree to the idea of constructive criticism, of the constructive criticism before getting started. It can't be something that's unsolicited, right? Like, it's never fun, right, if you're working on a project and then someone walks by unprompted and is like, I really think everything that you're doing there is wrong. Right, no one likes to hear that, especially if you didn't ask for someone to give advice about something that you're working on. Oftentimes when people give you that kind of unsolicited constructive criticism, they do it without knowing your needs. They do it without knowing what you're needing out of this project or what you're looking for from this project. And so when they do that without talking with you first, it doesn't feel constructive. It actually just feels like straight up criticism. So it's really important to establish that kind of level of trust between you and your partner before that you get started. But honestly, I think constructive criticism can be so impactful, and I think it's such an important skill to learn. I'll be honest, I used to really struggle with this in high school. Like, I wrote a 600-page fantasy book in high school that I was terrified for anyone to read because I knew it had problems. It was 600 pages, and really all it was that a group of characters went from one place to another. That was it. I knew it had a lot of problems, and yet even when my friends gave me some really good advice, like, hey Ben, you shouldn't have 5 pages where you just describe trees, like you really shouldn't do that. Like, I would get mad about that, and I shouldn't, because my friend was giving me good advice. It took me a long time to learn this, but constructive criticism has really helped me as a teacher. Like, when I've had teaching partners give me advice about how I can make the best possible lessons for students, that has been huge, but it has really been important for me as a writer. The editors who looked over my book, who gave me constructive criticism about how I could make a better book, how I could improve my writing, ended up being critical for me as a writer. They are why I was able to take a nearly 500-page book and get it down to about 300 pages and then get it published. It was all because of the editors who volunteered their time and gave me advice about how I could make the best book possible. And those experiences have really shown me how important this process can be. So let me show you the peer review pepper feedback form that I give to students before they turn in a lot of their creative projects in my STEAM classroom, but I've also used this as a social studies as well as an ELA, English language arts teacher. So the 3D Design Pepper feedback form, this form was actually developed by an educator named Lisa Hill, who is a teacher from Australia, who taught at Woodland Park Middle School in Colorado as an exchange teacher, which was which was just such an amazing experience because I learned so much from her. But I really love this Pepper feedback form that she put together because I feel like it's a great way to introduce students to the idea of constructive criticism and giving effective peer review. And so the rules for the feedback is it's always friendly and supportive feedback. Remember, with constructive, the idea is that you are building someone up with each point of your criticism. Always make sure it's specific and helpful, and we'll go over how to do that on this form. And so one of the most important things when you're establishing that trust with another student is making sure you know what kind of feedback they are wanting before going in. And so as you see with the peppers, they can choose between bell, jalapeno, habanero, and ghost pepper. And as you might guess, bell pepper is more mild. It's usually not considered very spicy. That feedback is generally a little more general. It's not as specific, and it's not as direct as something like ghost pepper feedback might be. And I think what's important to understand is that even if someone selects ghost pepper, you can't insult them. It's not permission to just insult their very existence or anything like that. No, even if they select ghost pepper, every single piece of criticism that you give has to be constructive. It has to help them. Because, and this is one of my favorite stories ever, one of my sixth graders, when she was giving feedback to we were doing Minecraft education, and students were designing, they were designing museums in Minecraft education. And one piece of feedback that she gave when she was grading another student is she was like, so no offense. And we all know what happens after the words no offense, right? Like you say the words no offense and then something incredibly offensive usually follows right after, right? And so she says the words no offense and then follows with like a tactical missile right after, because she was like, no offense, but my 7-year-old brother could have created something a lot better than this. Ouch, yeah, like I still think about that every time I do this assignment. But that statement right there, right, is not helpful. That doesn't build someone up, right? It's just an insult. And you can't do that with ghost pepper feedback. You have to make sure that the feedback is helpful when you are giving feedback to another, person. And so I usually get asked, well, Mr. Honeycutt, how do I do that? So in the same museum assignment, something that was actually pretty common was that students they would write out descriptions on the museum signage that they were writing, right? And usually there were a couple of misspellings, a few misspellings. And so something with bell pepper feedback that people would see was with bell pepper feedback, I noticed students would often say, so I noticed you had some misspellings on signs 1, 2, and 4. You might want to look over those, right? And that's really light, right? That's not getting too specific or too direct. That's just telling someone to run their signage through a spell check, right? That's very, very general. It's not super direct. With ghost pepper, if they're asking for ghost pepper and asking you to be direct, I have seen students on ghost pepper feedback, they have highlighted every single misspelled word that they've seen, right? And that can feel a little aggressive if you're not expecting it, but if someone asks for ghost pepper feedback, that's that kind of direct level of feedback that they're asking for at that point, and that would be okay, right? If you're just highlighting the misspelled words and showing someone where they can correct their misspellings, that's absolutely considered constructive criticism because it helps that student. And ultimately, that's the goal of constructive criticism, is that you are helping a student, helping someone else succeed to the best of their abilities. Something to keep in mind is that, and I don't know why this is an issue, but it's an issue every time I do this, is you can't force someone to click ghost pepper. You can't force someone to select ghost pepper. And as a writer, like normally I am all about ghost pepper feedback. Normally I want people to be as direct as possible. But there are days where I am just not in the mood for ghost pepper feedback. And honestly, no, this week that happened to me. So my wife Natalie and I, we have a son who we love dearly named Alex. He's 2 years old, and he had a hard night this week. Like we just got off a break, we're going back to school. His schedule is all changed. He had a night where he woke up twice, and I had to get up like at 3 o'clock in the morning and get him back down. And that night I got maybe 3 hours of sleep, and then I have an hour drive and then an 8-hour school day where I got to teach middle schoolers running off of 3 hours of sleep. And that day I needed coffee. I know there's a debate between wants and needs. I needed coffee that day, like IV drip of caffeine to function that day. And so I dropped my son off, and right before I'm going into work, I pull into the drive-thru, and I can smell the coffee bean just in the drive-thru. Like I'm so ready for this, that heavenly sip, first sip of coffee. Like I need it to function that day. I finally get my coffee. I'm so excited. I'm getting out of the drive-thru, and then a person in a white truck cuts me off. I slam on my brakes, squeeze the coffee that I'm holding in my hand, and it spills all over my pants, all over my shirt, and it's scalding hot, but honestly, I don't even care about any of that. I don't care if I teach drenched in coffee stains. The issue was almost all my coffee was gone and wasted. And you better believe, after having something like that happen to me, I was in no mood for ghost pepper feedback for the rest of the day. I needed that bell pepper feedback. And it's okay if you're working with a partner who wants bell pepper feedback. And so on this form, after you select the pepper feedback, you're going to write the person that you're reviewing. You write their name. That's the person that you're reviewing. The writer, that's where you remind the teacher. That's your name. That's where you put your name. And notice you're going to start by talking about the positives. This is where you can really show someone that you really do care about the work that they're doing. And it's also something you might notice when you're giving constructive criticism to someone. Something you might notice your teachers do is they do something called a positivity sandwich, right? They start with a positive they start with a positive, and they go into after starting with the positives, they then might go into constructive criticism afterwards. And after going into the constructive criticism, they then, after talking about the criticism, they might go into and finish up with another positive about the project. And so that can really help someone receive that constructive criticism. If you start with a positive, go into the criticism, and then end with a positive, positivity sandwich, that can help someone listen to constructive criticism and take it in a more positive way than they might otherwise. And so after talking about the positives and the rooms for improvement that you see, you'll get a rubric, and this is where you can bold where you feel a student would get graded, or how you would grade a student. And remember, you are doing this before your peer is turning this into their teacher. This is a chance for a student to make improvements so that they can get the best grade possible. So this can be really helpful. And normally what I have students do is just bold where they think their partner's grades are in this assignment. What's important to remember on the rubric is that this is an estimate. It's not a guarantee that that's what the teacher's going to see too, but what I love about the rubric is that if you are missing something on the rubric, like if there is something on the rubric that you are just straight up missing, like you forgot to cover on the rubric, having your peer grade the rubric is a great way to make sure that you're not missing something, and it's also a great way to point out if you've noticed your partner's missing something. So once done with that, you have the opportunity to leave final comments. If you have any final takes about ways that your peer can improve, or different ideas that you got from looking at their project, this is where you can give that feedback. I think one thing to remember about constructive criticism, it was so hard for me. When you get good advice about how you can fix the work that you're working on, whether it be a creative project or a project you're doing for school, that advice is only going to help you. It's going to help you create the best possible project. And that's why I think it's so important to not only learn how to give constructive criticism, but also learn how you can take constructive criticism, apply it, because it can help you in so many different facets of your life. Students, this whole concept has really been transformational for me. It's why I've gotten a book published, and it's why I'm such a believer in it. And students and teachers, I will have this link available so that you can all use the Pepper feedback form if you think it could be useful in your classroom. This is something that has been hugely effective in my classroom. It's a routine that we have before every project is turned in. Students know the process. They've responded very well to the process, and I think I couldn't be more of a believer in teaching that process in the classroom. But thank you so much for watching this today. I hope it's been useful for you, and yeah, let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Thank you so much.